Let's open with the blessing for study. So I'm going to share my screen, and if you feel comfortable, I'll invite you to unmute yourself so that we can say these words together and we sanctify this act of study. Please join me. Baruch atah
Baruch
Baruch
Adonai
atah
atah
Eloheinu melech
Adonai
haolam
Eloheinu melech
Eloheinu melech
haolam
haolam,
asher
asher
קידשנו
kishanu
במצוותיו
u'tzivanu
b'mitzvotav,
וציוונו
b'mitzvot
tzivanu
לעשות
b'mitzvot,
דברי
את
תורה.
דברי
Torah,
Torah.
which means blessed is the eternal whose mitzvot, whose commandments bring holiness to our lives, and who commands us to immerse or engage in words of Torah. So our topic for today is if you save a single life. The idea of human life and the worth of human life has been on my mind a lot lately, and I don't want to tie it to any one particular political event or things going on in the world, but I think it's clear how we are living in a world right now that needs to be thinking about what is the worth of a human being. And I think Judaism has something to contribute to this conversation. So I thought that what we do is to study the famous passage that I'm sure, we all heard the pithy version of it, which is if you save a single life, you've saved an entire world. We're going to get there. That's in the middle of the Mishnah that we're about to look at here. But I want to look at it as a whole and really understand, or at least talk about, what are the assumptions that Judaism is making? What are the teachings inherent in this? Why does the Mishnah place that highly universal concept about what the worth of a human life into the particular context that it places in? So the text that we're about to look at today is from the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the rabbinic code of Jewish law that was codified in around the year 200 of the Common Era. This is the rabbis' first real go at putting together Judaism into one big compilation. And the Mishnah is the basis for the Talmud. The Talmud is essentially the discussions that happen in the 300 years after the Mishnah, based in the order of the Mishnah. The text we're about to look at comes from tractate Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin actually comes from a Greek word, which means a gathering or a court. So the Sanhedrin was in ancient Israel a court body, a judicial body that over that well, depending on which era of time you're talking about, was part of the temple. It was a body of Jewish sages, power figures in some kind, and it oversaw the judicial workings of the province of Judea. And so in this tractate of the Mishnah, the rabbis are discussing how did that court operate. Now, of course, the rabbis of the Mishnah live 130 to 150 years after the destruction of the temple, so they've never actually seen with their own eyes the the Sanhedrin as it existed during the time of the temple, which means that we don't know exactly how historical this is, which means what it really is it very possibly a sort of an idealized version of how the rabbis think a court ought to operate. And you'll see that as it comes into as we look through the text, we'll see the rabbis quoting scripture, giving homiletical teachings. Did this really happen in a courtroom? Who knows? But this is how the rabbis think a courtroom ought to operate. So let me share my screen, and I really view this as just a sort of what I like to call good old-fashioned text study, where we're going to make our way through this text, and I hope that you will. I hope you'll raise your hand and talk about it with me. You can see in the middle, the yellow part, that's the famous part, right? Anyone who destroys one soul is considered to have destroyed an entire world. And anyone who sustains, whoops, what's happening here? Sustains one soul is considered to have sustained an entire world. But I don't want to start there. I want to start at the beginning and ask ourselves what the Mishnah is doing here. So, could I get a volunteer to read for us the first paragraph on the page? If you'd like to read, you can actually just unmute right now. I already see Bob's hand up. All right, Sarah, you'll be next. We're going to start with Bob.
How do they warn the witnesses in capital cases? They would bring them in and warn them. Lest you speak from supposition or rumor or hearsay or based on the statement of a trusted person, lest you not know that ultimately we will examine you with inquiry and interrogation. You should know that capital cases are not like monetary cases. In monetary law cases, a person can pay money to atone for a wrongful verdict. But in capital cases, the blood of the accused and the blood of the accused's offspring are ascribed to the witness's testimony until the end of all generations.
Thank you, Bob. Some of you have probably seen this text before. For others, it might be brand new. So, what do we have here? The rabbis are describing a courtroom scene, and it is a capital case. Capital, remember, now, ancient Judaism doesn't exactly differentiate between, capital and non-capital in the sense of liable for death penalty versus not liable for death penalty. Ancient Judaism has monetary and it has capital, right? There was no jail in those days. You were either liable for punishment or not, and the punishment here is the punishment of death. So the rabbis have imagined a discussion or an admonition. The word here for warn, right there. The Hebrew word for warn here is me'ayimin. Le'ayim in modern Hebrew means to threaten. So we could read this to say, how do they threaten the witnesses when they bring them into the courtroom? And I wonder, if somebody, I see already Susan's hand up, let's talk about why it is that you would threaten or warn your witnesses in a capital case using this particular language. Susan, what do you see here?
I was wondering actually if this is where I studied the piece in the Gemara on with Hadar on the cities of refuge. Is there any relation to this piece to that?
Not really. I mean, only in the sense that cities of refuge are a place where a person who accidentally kills another can go to be safe from the avenger who would, in even earlier
Okay,
times,
thank you.
in even earlier times when there was not exactly a court system, the justice system was based on family retribution, which was regulated. So the city of refuge would have been a place where a person who committed manslaughter, accidental manslaughter, could go to avoid the retribution. What that has in common with this is that they are both attempting to place limits upon how a person can use the justice system to harm another person, essentially. That's a case where a person could have, gone and killed somebody because they're angry at them. And this as well is a case where couldn't a person get on the stand and lie? Couldn't a person get on the stand and, exaggerate or speak from hearsay and thereby bring harm to the person who has been accused? Bob, go ahead.
Well, most of the cases I imagine in those days were civil cases, as we might call them, and not criminal. And in an agrarian society, you'd get a lot of arguments over where the line was between one field and another, or whether a tree that was on one property, but the branches overhung onto the other property and the figs fell off onto the other person's land, whose were the figs. And a lot, I think, of the Mishnah and the Talmud deals with things like that. So that's mostly probably what people were used to coming to the Sanhedrin and talking about. So when it came to a criminal case, a capital case, they needed this warning.
They needed this warning. And let's take a look at the warning. I see some of you in the chat saying, whoa, like this is a big penalty for perjury, right? The blood of the accused and the blood of the accused's offspring are ascribed to the witness's testimony until the end of generations. In other words, if you give false witness and this person is wrongly executed, that blood is on whom? That blood is on you, the witness. You have committed murder, is what's being said here. Now you can see where there's an argument also, or a discussion to be had here about capital punishment, which is not the conversation we're having today. But, Judaism attempts to make capital punishment very, very difficult. But what's worth noticing here especially is that even in the case of a person who's accused of a crime, right? This is not necessarily society's favorite person. This is a person who stands accused of murder right now. That person has the right to be spoken of honestly in court, and for the society to ensure that that person, if they are indeed being punished, which they might be in this situation, is being punished rightly. And from here, the Mishnah is going to go on to talk about the worth of human life. And one question for us to put on the table now, and which I think we'll talk about as we get a little further in, is why does the Mishnah situate this conversation about the worth of human life around an accused criminal? Why does it not situate it around somebody's mother or, the leader of a community? What is it about the accused criminal that makes them the test case for what is a human life worth? The Mishnah now goes on, and can I get Sarah, who had her hand up earlier, to read this next paragraph, please?
I can't see the whole paragraph.
Oh, here, I'll move it up a little bit.
Thank you. This is as we find in Torah with regard to Cain, who killed his brother, as it is stated, "Your brother's bloods cry out to me from the ground." Genesis 4:10. It does not say your brother's blood, but rather your brother's bloods. That is to say, both his blood and the blood of his offspring. An alternative explanation: your brother's bloods is meant to teach that his blood was spattered on the trees and on the stones.
It's relatively unpleasant imagery there at the end. What the rabbis are doing here is, this is a midrash, in the sense of being a Torah interpretation of the Hebrew word damim. Damim is the Hebrew word for blood, but it is one of those words that is plural in Hebrew. There are others. Mayim, the Hebrew word for water, is plural. It means waters. Right? There is no singular word for water in Hebrew. There actually is a singular word for blood in Hebrew. It's dam, but in this case, the Torah says, "Your brother's bloods are crying out to me." And the rabbis want to know, why does it say your brother's bloods when Cain kills Abel? And they explain it by way of saying that means his own blood and the blood of his offspring. What they're explaining is this part up here. And the accused's offspring until the end of all generations. In other words, if a person dies wrongfully, there's more to a person than just a person. The person's worth is not only their own enclosed self. There is more to them. If you kill a person, you can see where we're going here. If you kill a person, you have killed more than just that person. You have killed their potential offspring. You have destroyed or prevented the work that they might have done in the world. We should be very, very careful about, or very, very cognizant about what a person is, what a person represents in the world. And the midrashic example of that is Cain. And then, of course, the midrash, because the rabbis can't leave well enough alone, brings an alternative description, which is a bloody, gory, unpleasant picture of what Cain did to Abel, which is that he killed him brutally, right? So the rabbis are painting a picture of a human being being brutally killed, and with him, all of the hopes and dreams and possibilities of what that person might represent are also being killed. I see the Vanix. Go ahead, Peter or Joy.
Rabbi, I think you just answered your own question. Um, the you said, why is this so? I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but why is this so important? And the answer is because it's a capital case, and the worth of an individual is paramount regardless of what the situation is that he's charged with. He has a worth, whatever that worth is. And in a capital case, if you execute him, then you are destroying that worth and the worth, as you said, the worth of those who follow him or who might follow him.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So, and I think that brings us to this next passage, which is going to say that anyone who destroys a soul is considered to have destroyed an entire world. Let's pause for a moment and talk about what this means. Just when 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 the Mishnah says a person is worth a world, if you destroy a life, if you kill, you have destroyed a world. If you save a life, if you sustain a single person, you have sustained a world. What does that mean? What are the rabbis trying to teach us with that passage, with that language? I see Cheryl, please.
Well, if you destroy a person or save a person, if you start with one person and that person has, say, 4 children, and each of those 4 children have 4 children, and each of those 16 children have 4 children. I'm not going to do the math, but you can imagine it continues from there. It becomes a whole world.
Mm-hmm.
It very rapidly becomes a huge number. And if you've destroyed one person, you've destroyed that entire line of people that's never going to exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And if you save one person, you've saved that entire line of people that will exist because you saved them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's world in the sense of future, of potential world, right? The potential that a person can bring into the world, being offspring or also being accomplishments, right? Things that we might learn, things that we might create later on in life. Toby, what's your take on this?
That's exactly my thought because not everyone has children, but but even if we don't have children, we absolutely impact the world, whether it's through our charitable work or our friends and family that are not our children. We still do impact the world and hopefully in a positive way. Well, if let's say I'm on this team of at a shelter. If I don't go and my whole team doesn't show up, what happens to those that were depending on us?
Yeah.
They're at a loss. So I would say, I do. I've been blessed with 4 children, but even if I didn't, I would like to think I have an impact on the world.
Yep. Yeah, right. So let's expand this beyond actual progeny, right? To think about what is it that we bring into the world. A person is a world. We have friends, we have passions, we have, every person is a world in the sense that every person brings something unique into the world. Being a world in a way is the opposite of being a number. A number is to dehumanize. To think of a person as a world is to humanize. To think of them as a separate individual who has something unique to contribute to the world.
Rabbi Micah, what are you contributing to us?
A
lot, and we are not your children.
Thank you, Toby. I appreciate that. Lots of hands up. I want to move on in the text, so I'm gonna just go to Aviva and Yehuda who had their hand up first, and then to the others I apologize, and I'll try to save room for more time for more comments at the end. Go ahead, Aviva and Yehuda.
There's something that's really disturbing to me about this concept, because if you accuse someone and the result is death to them by capital punishment, and all the generations that you may have prevented from existing in the world, But I'm looking at this a little bit differently. All the generations that will continue to grow up with hate and will continue to perpetuate, I mean, we don't need to really look too far to see what happens with generations. And that, I don't know where this fits in. So that's one I was going to say. Yehuda was going to add about the idea of not having progeny, which I'm interpreting, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm interpreting the idea of not having progeny as a profound lack of hope. Like the idea of not bringing children into the world to me is like the most hopeless expression. So anyhow, just to tie it back to Tikvah.
In our lives, we have two children, and they both decided not to have children. And when the second one said that, a little part of me died. And yet it's their decision. I don't know that they have the wisdom to understand what their decisions are all about. But, as we have gotten older and we have that much more experience, and we both were public service workers, Aviva, a nurse, and I, a teacher, the number of lives that we touched from our work multiplied, of course. And they aren't doing that.
Yep. Thank you, Yehuda. Yeah, I hear how deeply that touches you, that decision of theirs. And also, I mean, I just want to lift up both that's very painful and very difficult, and that lots of people choose not to have children, and that doesn't mean they don't have a legacy, which I hear you saying as well, right? And so that's such an interesting thing about what it is to build a world around ourselves. Aviva, you said something else I think is really important, which is that our actions in the world have future potential, even with regard to, people. Like, we're not only talking about potential children, we're talking about the ways that hatreds build, right? We're talking about the ways that resentments build. My actions or my positive or negative actions now have the potential to affect things and to grow as we go down the line. If I respond to you with love and understanding now, does that create a better situation for us 100 years from now, right? So here, turn with me back to this text, and let's just see where the rabbis take it for one last little bit. And remember, our question on the table is, why is this about someone accused of a crime? So the rabbis now say, therefore, the human being, Adam, was created alone. So we took this back to Cain and Abel here, right? And we now take it even further back to the creation of the first human being, who, by the way, his name wasn't Adam. The word Adam means human being, right? It's not a name, it's an appellation. This was an Adam, a human being that was created. Why, the rabbis ask, was only one human being created in the original? And they give 4 different reasons. The first of which is this famous passage that we know. Why was only one person created? To teach that anyone who destroys one soul is considered to have destroyed an entire world. And anyone who sustains one soul is considered to have sustained an entire world. Every one of us is Adam Harishon. Adam Harishon is the Hebrew word for the first human being. Every one of us, just like Adam was the only human being in the entire world for a short time, so is every one of us at the center of an entire world in all the ways we've described. But there's more. There are other reasons why God created only one human being. For the sake of peace among people, so that no one will say to another, my ancestor is greater than your ancestor. You can't say my dad's better than your dad if you have the same dad, right? And if we human beings all have the same parent, which is what Judaism teaches, then there is actually nobody who has better parentage, better ancestry than anybody else. Of course, we as liberal Jews, modern people, we may not believe that the world was literally descended from Adam Harishon. But the message inherent here is a really important one. And in fact, it's also biologically true that all humans are descended from, a single parentage line. We are all cousins. We are all one big human family. And Judaism conceives of humanity as a family, which I think is a very important teaching here. Third reason, only one human being was created so the heretics would not say there are many authorities in heaven. In other words, many gods in heaven. Now, this sounds like it's just sort of like anti-heretic polemic, right? You can't say there's more than one God if there was only one human. But you know what else this says? This says God doesn't love any human beings better than any other human beings. Like, if you guys are the children of Zeus and we're the children of Jupiter, then, our God hates you and your God hates us. But if there's only one God and only one human being, and we're all descended from the one human being created with the one God, then there are no human beings in the world that God loves more than any others. And in fact, if we as humans are meant to emulate God by ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, loving your neighbor as yourself, or by ve'ahavta metager, loving the stranger, then what we're really doing is we're emulating God's love for all human beings. Which brings me to the last reason that God created only one human being, to tell of the greatness of the supreme sovereign. In other words, God wanted to toot God's own horn by only creating one human being because, as it says at the end of that first line, when a person stamps several coins with one seal, they are all similar to each other. Imagine a coin maker just making one coin after the next out of the same mold over and over again. They all look exactly the same. And what does God do? God, the Supreme Sovereign, the Holy Blessed One, stamped all people with the seal or mold of the first human being. We are all made in the same mold, and that mold is Adam Harishon, the first human being. And yet, as it says, not one of them is similar to another. So Judaism conceives of human beings as being like a bunch of stamps that are all the same, but also all not the same at the same time. A bunch of stamps that come from exactly the same mold. And that mold, that Adam Harishon mold, is what gives us our worth. Our worth comes from the fact that, at least in traditional Judaism, God loves us all equally. God created us as all human beings, and out of the same mold. We are all equal. We are all created in the divine image. We are all of infinite worth. And at the same time, none of us are the same. Every one of us is a little different. And that none of us being the same part of it, which is the other side of the coin, pun intended, is actually perhaps what gives us our unique worth. So it's a very interesting conception that the rabbis have here of human beings as being all the same and not at all the same, which is exactly why we are worth so much. So we're at the end of our time here. I'm happy to take two more comments, and then I'll just close us up by saying why I think the rabbis set this in a courtroom scene. So Jan, and then Plautz, and then I'll close us up. With quick comments, please. Oh, Jan, you're on mute. Are you able to unmute there? All right, while Jan is unmuting, go ahead, Aviva and Yehuda. Jan, we'll need you to
This sort of comes back to this epiphany I had in one of the previous classes about how to deal with Elohim in the text all the time. If we each are individual people, we each also have our own individual takes on God as well. And that's why the Elohim is over and over again in the text, because the Elohim references all our individual takes of God.
Nice. Yeah, not unlike how when we say the Amidah, we say God is Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. The God of Abraham, the God of Sarah. Each of them has their own individual relationship with God. Each of us brings something unique and special into the world. And that makes you, whoever you are, every one of us, completely irreplaceable in the world. Every human being is entirely irreplaceable. Jan, go ahead. I saw you unmute for a second. Are you able to unmute again? How about now? Did the button push up? Did the button jump up? There we go. Oh, Jan, I think we've lost you. All right. So let me just close up here with my final thoughts. I asked a question in the beginning. Why is this put in a courtroom setting? Why, when the Mishnah goes to teach about the worth of human beings, why does it not make it about your mother or your tribal head or your own sibling or something like that? And I think the reason is that this teaching has nothing to do with how much we like somebody. Who's the person that we might like the least? The person who stands accused of murder is the person that we might like the least as a society. This is the person society is most likely to view as expendable. It's the person we're most likely perhaps to view as being unlikable or unwanted. And Judaism says that person is the framework for what it means to be human. What it means to be human is to see everybody, even the person we're not inclined to like or want around or view as, an integral part of our society. Even that person is totally irreplaceable. Even that person deserves to be treated like a human being. And, to answer the question that just put in the chat, how can this be hopeful? It's hopeful because we as humans have the capacity to see the humanity in others, even people we don't agree with, even people we don't like, even people who hold views that are diametrically opposed to ours. Our job is to see humanity in the person across the border, across town, and or across the aisle. And when we do that, which we can, and in fact we do all the time, then we bring hope into the world. Then we have the capacity to make a better world because we will recognize that nobody is expendable. And I think we all need to write to our senators and Congress people and remind them right now that nobody is expendable, and we all need to be acting accordingly. So thank you, everybody. Have a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care.
Okay.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.